All right, let's jump right in. When most people think about the second coming of Christ, they picture something big, dramatic, visible to everyone. But what if that's not the whole story? What if it's something else entirely? The source material we're looking at today presents a completely different picture, and honestly, it's pretty fascinating. So let's get into it.
So, right off the bat, we run into a puzzle. A real contradiction, actually, right in the heart of biblical prophecy. How is it that the scriptures seem to describe the Lord's return in two totally opposite ways? I mean, on one hand, you have this idea of a silent, secret arrival. And on the other, it's this loud, can't miss it global event. So, which one is it? How can it be both? And you can see the problem laid out so clearly here. In one corner, you've got all this language about stealth, right? Coming as a thief, not with outward show, happening while the world is just going about its business, totally clueless, just like in the days of Noah. But then look at the other side. It's the complete opposite. We're talking a shout, the voice of the archangel, the trump of God, flaming fire. I mean, you can't get much louder than that. So the big question remains, how can a single event be both silent and loud? That's the mystery we're going to try and unravel.
Okay, so how on earth do you make sense of this? Do you just pick a side? Well, the source we're looking at says, no, you don't have to. It suggests there's a key that unlocks this whole puzzle. And that key isn't about ignoring one set of verses. It's about going back to the original language, to the Greek, and getting to the bottom of one single really important word. And this is it. This is the key. The word is parousia. Now, for centuries, this word has almost always been translated as coming. But, and this is a huge but, our source makes the case that what it really means is presence. And that changes everything. Seriously, it shifts the whole concept from a single momentary event, an arrival, to something completely different, a long-term, ongoing, invisible presence.
This quote really helps frame it perfectly. Think about it. The first advent, his first coming, wasn't just the single moment he was born, right? Of course not. It was his whole life, his entire ministry. It was a period of presence. So the source argues, why would we think about this second advent any differently? The parousia isn't a flash in the pan. It's an extended period of presence, just like the first time. Okay, so you're probably asking, why invisible? That's the crucial question, right? Well, according to the source, the reason is simple. Christ isn't human anymore. He's no longer the man Christ Jesus. After the resurrection, he became a life-giving spirit being, exalted to the divine nature. And a spirit being wouldn't come back in a physical flesh and blood body. It just doesn't follow. So his presence would have to be spiritual and, by definition, invisible to our human eyes.
But wait a second, is there any basis for this? This idea of being present but invisible? The source says absolutely. And it points to a very specific time period as the perfect model, a kind of blueprint for how this works, the 40 days after the resurrection.
If you think about what happened during those 40 days, it's pretty wild. He was definitely there, but he wasn't always seen. He would just appear and disappear. He'd show up in different forms. One minute he's a gardener, the next he's a stranger on the road. Even his best friends didn't recognize him by his face. He literally materialized inside a locked room. What does that tell you? This whole pattern, the source says, shows he was an invisible spirit who could choose to show up in a physical form whenever he wanted. So, what are the big takeaways from this? The source basically boils it down to this. His default setting was now spiritual and invisible. The way people recognized him wasn't by looking at his face, but by what he did, his actions, his words, like when he broke the bread. And so, this whole 40-day experience, that becomes the perfect template for understanding his second parousia, his second presence. And get this, to really drive the point home, the source actually does the math. It calculates that during that 40-day period, Christ was present but invisible for 79/80ths of the time. Think about that. The vast majority of the time, he was there but unseen. His natural state was invisibility. The times he actually appeared, those were the exceptions, not the rule. Okay, that makes a lot of sense for the silent as a thief part of the puzzle. But what about the other side? We still have to deal with the loud stuff, right? The shout, the trumpet, the flaming fire. If his presence is quiet and invisible, what's all that noise about? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The source argues those aren't literal sounds at all. They're symbols, powerful symbols for huge world-changing events. Let's kind of break down this decoding. So, the shout,
That's seen as this global cry, this awakening of people everywhere demanding their rights and liberties. The voice of the archangel, that's the symbol for Christ taking command, starting his reign. The trump of God, that connects to the seventh trumpet in Revelation, signaling a long period of change and judgment. And the flaming fire, that's the time of trouble, this intense period that tears down all the old, corrupt systems. So you see, it's not about literal noise. It's about massive social and political upheaval. So, when you put all of this together, what does it actually mean? Well, the implication is huge. It means the second coming isn't some big event in the future that we're all just sitting around waiting for. It's a gradual, ongoing transformation, a process guided by this invisible presence that's happening right now. And you have to understand this one presence is experienced in two completely different ways. It's like two sides of the same coin. For those who are looking for it, who are studying prophecy, this invisible presence is like a light turning on, a source of truth and understanding. But for everyone else, for the world that doesn't know what's going on, it just feels like chaos. It's the time of trouble, the fire that's burning down all the old ways of doing things. Same presence, totally different experiences. And there's one last little linguistic clue that really ties this all together. It's another Greek word, astra-pe. Now, you'll usually see this translated as lightning, which makes you think of a sudden, quick flash, right? But the source says a much better translation is bright shining. Now, don't think of lightning. Think of a sunrise. A sunrise is an instant. It's a gradual dawning that slowly, steadily illuminates the entire world. And that, right there, is the perfect metaphor for the parousia. Not a flash, but a slow, unstoppable dawning of a new day. So, when all is said and done, the big idea from this source is this. The second coming isn't a show you're supposed to watch. It's not something you'll see with your physical eyes. It's a deep, fundamental shift in reality itself, something you have to recognize with your mind, with understanding. And so that leaves us with a pretty profound question to think about. What if the biggest, most important change in the world isn't some spectacular event we're all waiting to watch on TV? What if it's a quiet presence that we have to learn to discern for ourselves in the world around us? It's a totally different way to think about this prophecy, for sure. Thanks for digging into this with us.